What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Pick Swap podcast. After a little late night action with the Sixers last night, they get a win over the Lakers. So we're going to talk about that. We'll touch on the Heat debacle a little bit. An interesting little tidbit that happened there. We'll talk about the NBA awards and everything that's left. About 10 games left, but for now, we'll introduce Sean. How's it going, brother?
Yeah, not too bad. I mean, I feel like a lot of people are a little bit up in arms over the win last night. I mean, late game, sleepwalking through it. Sixers still found a way to win. It's ugly, but we got there, so it is what it is.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. It is what it is. But before we get too in depth here, we're going to talk about our partnership with BetUS. Like we've talked about before, we're super excited to be a part of their brand and what they're creating. They're one of the top sportsbook and casinos in the market right now, and they're currently expanding. They just added player props, which is awesome for us, and the pick swap parlay. So make sure you stay in tune for that. If you use our code PICKSWAP at login, you'll get your first bet risk-free up to $500. That's PICKSWAP at login to join in on the fun. So last night, they started 10 o'clock for us Eastern time guys at 10 o'clock. They're in LA. No LeBron, no AD, obviously, as well. Russell Westbrook has been. I decided last night that I really don't like the way that he plays. Um, as a player, he pisses me off. As a person, I think Russ is great. I think he's
hmm
done a lot of really good things. I think what he stands for is really great. And like as a person, he seems like a very, very good dude. And that why I won't make disparaging remarks about that. He pisses me off in the way that he plays basketball.
Yeah,
Um,
I think he's like hurting his reputation at this point. Like I'm watching him like questioning like was this guy like ever like as good as I thought he was? And it's like he was back in the day like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
a very good player and a high quality NBA player. But I really feel like the worst version of Russell Westbrook is not a good basketball player, and we're seeing that put on full display.
Yeah. I don't even know. Like there was just things that just bothered me yesterday. And I don't know. Just watching him play, I was just getting pissed. Like
He
maybe
literally
it's just like,
broke out the rock the baby when it was 4-4 3 minutes into the game, and I was losing it. But yeah,
yeah,
that's
I'm like,
Russ.
all
That's
right,
Russ.
yeah, yeah. I mean, more power to you. He's one of my guys, a UCLA guy. So I can't say too much because I've been a Russ fan and I've stuck through it for a while, but I hated that last night. And like the rivalry thing that used to happen with him and Embiid was fun. Back when there was like a rivalry to it, I guess a little bit. It seemed like they didn't like each other, which is fine. But yeah, last night pissed me off a little bit. There's a lot to talk about here. Um, off night, it felt like mostly Tobias Harris played really well.
Yeah.
Tyrese Maxey played really well. And a couple of the other guys stepped up in times of need. George Niang, especially early on, played really well. Like you said earlier, a lot of people are kind of up in arms about it, which any people are going to find any reason to be upset about the Sixers, even when they win. But just take me through last night. And you said you're not too concerned. So what did you see?
Yeah, I mean, like, first off, like, look at the Miami Heat real quick. They just lost to the Sixers without no, but without Embiid and Harden, and then to the Warriors without Steph and without like this happens to every
Clay and
team.
Draymond.
And Draymond, yeah. So I and Clay and Draymond. So I guess my point is like the bad losses and they just
Yeah.
happen to every team, and that we've seen it with the Sixers a lot of times this season. And luckily, last night was not one of those. They found a way to come out on the right end of that. Sure, it wasn't beautiful basketball or pretty, and there were scrappy minutes. There was a lot to nitpick, but at the end of the day, like the Sixers are finding ways to still get wins. They're still learning how to play with each other. The Harden going down definitely scared me, but it seems like he's fine. All reports seem to be that he's going to be okay after the game. He was talking pretty positively about it. So that was a little heartbeat crisis avoided there. I thought it was a very good Tobias game. I mean, he just did his thing, which is Tobias Harris. But the thing that I liked is late in game he was ending up with Austin Reeves on him, and that
Yeah.
was kind of the circled matchup of like this is where the Sixers can attack, and that should be the case. Like Tobias Harris
Yeah.
should be able to get by Austin Reeves on a pretty much every possession basis. So like I like that was recognized. I like the trust in Tobias. I'm happy that it happened. And the four of Tobias, Maxey, Harden, and Embiid combined for 95 points, which I mean, that's once again a good and a bad thing, but it was cool to see all of them play relatively well last night.
Yeah, and like Austin Reeves, I noticed like two or three times last night ended a possession, catching the ball out of the basket, like out of the net, and just like slamming it on the ground. And
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
laughing because I'm like, come on, man. Like I know Tobias isn't. He's not a great player, but he's better than Austin Reeves. Like he's gonna give you the work, kind of consistently there. I mean, without Carmelo Anthony banking in like 3 shots in the fourth quarter, which clearly he did not mean to do. Um, like the Sixers win that game by 12, 15. Like I thought there was never really a time last night where I considered that game to be up in the air.
Hmm.
I kind of figured throughout the whole thing they were just going to dominate. I was a couple things disappointed me in watching that game, and we can kind of go kind of deeper into these. One, like, why is Dwight Howard scoring 20 points? Why is he
Yeah.
in the area enough, around the rim enough with the ball in his hands and not being contested enough to score 20 plus points in a game? Like, how many times did he score 20 plus last year? Like, did we actually I wish we had a number. I should have looked that up before we started, but like
I'm pretty confident it was 0. I'm pretty
maybe
confidently say it was
one.
0.
Like, I
Yeah.
remember him scoring like 18 one game, and I was like, holy shit, Dwight went crazy last night. It's like,
Yeah.
come on, man. Like Dwight just can't happen. That kind of stuff like can't happen. Like Dwight Howard can't have a 20-point game against you if you're gonna be, playing good basketball. The pick and roll thing, the lack of pick and roll, I guess I should say. We've seen what Dwight Howard is good and bad at this stage in his career. And one of the things that he is very bad at is defending the pick and roll. I just, we only saw it a handful of times. Like Tyrese Maxey should they should have been putting Tyrese Maxey in a pick and roll with Joel Embiid constantly. Because what
Yeah.
are they gonna do? Like Dwight Howard can't play drop because then it's just a 2-on-1. And he can't press up on Tyrese Maxey because there's no chance. Like there was 2 times it happened. Howard stepped, and the second he took a step, Maxey was already at the rim. So like I just don't get why they didn't attack that more often. I know maybe I'm not seeing the full picture with that. But I don't know. It just didn't make sense to me. I don't know if you have any take on that.
Yeah, I talked about this before the show with you, but the thing that is blows my mind is the Sixers seem to just like forget the weaknesses of players that were
Yeah.
previously on the team. The same way with Seth Curry, it blew my mind the way the scouting report was for Seth Curry in the Brooklyn game. But it's like we know what Dwight Howard's limitations are. Like he has a very
Yeah.
specific thing that he can do, and that's all at this stage of his career, and that was
Yeah.
not exploited last night. Same thing with Curry. There was no ISO let Maxey take him because I stand by the take that there's not an NBA player that Seth Curry can guard one-on-one on a consistent basis. And same with like going under screens on Seth Curry. It's like this is the easiest guy in the world to chase off the 3-point line. I just don't get it. So I agree with like there's a seems to be just like a forgetfulness in guys that they should very well know the scouting report of. I mean, last night I'm not going to nitpick too hard on that specifically. A thing I will say, and I'm usually Mr. Positive, Joel Embiid's the best, so I feel like I
Yeah.
have the right to say this here. I don't think Embiid is a particularly good rebounder, and I know that's weird to say
No.
that him averaging 11.3 rebounds per game in the top 10 in the NBA in that category, but purely based on size, he obviously comes down with a lot. His like angles and positioning and reads on the ball off the rim are all like not that great, and again, it's like fine. Like he obviously makes up for it because he snatched up a bunch. But for the Sixers to be like maximized, they really do need another guy being able to like read rebounds, position right, and do all that. Like there were a couple. Austin Reeves had one where he snuck in, had an easy putback right off the glass
Yeah.
last night
Yeah.
with Embiid standing right next to it. And there's just like a lot of those throughout the game. And I know some of that is for sure like him conserving his energy and him not going all out on every rebound because that has become kind of the nature of Joel's game to like make sure he's ready for the fourth quarter and that kind of thing, which, it is what it is. But I would like to see like a little more ability in that category, I feel like.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think he's a better offensive rebounder than he is a defensive rebounder, which to some people like that might seem like the same thing, but there's definitely a knack to it. I mean, to be fair, when he's offensive rebounding, most of the time he's in position already, and
Yeah.
he just misses the shot and just happens to be in the right position to rebound offensively there. But you know, that is, I think, the one thing that we can talk about with Embiid's game that just hasn't been, at an elite level, this season. Again, it's tough. I know, like, and he looked like he was dealing with some pain last night, or at least some discomfort in his back.
Hmm.
Stanley Johnson pulled him down at a weird angle, and I don't know what to make of it. I know he was out with back soreness against the Heat when we talk about that game, but yeah, I don't know. It's tough with him because you do like expect so much from him defensively as well as offensively, and to add the rebounding in as well. I mean, to be a complete player, you got to do all facets of the game. But yeah, no, I do agree with you. Sometimes it also seems like that's where he takes the most time off
Yeah.
on the court is most of the time because he's an an activated defender. He's he's an elite defender. He's a top
Mhm.
3 in defensive player of the year right now, and he's a great
3
rim protector. But that is where he kind of lacks. I think
Yeah.
if there was one area,
Yeah, 3 blocks last night, and he had 'em all 3 of them were, like, timed perfectly and, like,
huge. Yeah,
right, just pin perfect. So I
yeah,
still love doing that. And to me, like, as far as just a basketball standpoint, I think that's so important as the anchor of your defense. Like, whenever it gets into like the different center discussions, I just think the way you set up defensively just changes if you don't have a center that can do that. Like, if you don't have a guy that you can funnel into and allow him to like guys to either not get their shot off or just be sent away. Like, that's the pure Utah Jazz system, and what they do with Rudy Gobert is all geared toward that, because Gobert is really the only plus defender on that team outside of you'll get sparky minutes here and there, but guys like Joe Ingles and Bogdanovich, like their whole role is just funneling it so Gobert can make a play. And the fact that Joel can do everything he does offensively while still carrying that defensive ability is huge. But the rebounding is absolutely a thing that is going to be more and more of a concern as the playoffs come up. I don't really know what the go-to way to fix it is, other than like try harder, Joel, or like I don't think there's a guy to throw in next to him on the roster right now that fixes that. We can make the same kind of theoretical b-ball conversations, but there's no chance that actually happens. But I don't know. I would like to see some more defensive emphasis from this team and Joel specifically.
yeah. And we can kind of go into that a little bit because last night the Lakers were shorthanded on a lot of levels, and Dwight Howard was the only center that played any minutes for them last night. So they didn't have a backup center, and Doc Rivers still chose to play DeAndre Jordan as, in those minutes, really not changing his rotations very much. Although we did see a lot of Shake and Furkan last night, and Furkan hit a big shot.
Love it.
Um, which was nice to see, kind of keeping that rhythm going. Shake was pretty quiet, but Furkan looked, kind of like he was back in a rhythm a little bit. He looked confident again. Not to get too deep into that, but he did look confident again. But to talk about DeAndre Jordan again, I know we talked about it a lot on Tuesday, and there's a lot to say about it, but I just don't understand in a situation like that where Wenyen Gabriel is the biggest player, essentially playing the 5 for the Lakers, and they're playing like a 5 out, and DeAndre Jordan's kind of chasing around out of position. It just so happens so often where he's just nowhere near the play where he needs to be, and he's just out of position. He's not a good rim defender, as we've seen. Like you said last week, opponents are shooting like what do you say, 70+% from at the
Yeah,
rim,
this was as of 2 or 3 games ago at this point, but it was 75% through his first 5 games here.
which is like just god awful.
Yeah,
Can't guard a pick and roll. Like literally happened 2 or 3 times in a row. They just set him in like, which is what I want the Sixers to do with
with
Dwight
Dwight
Howard.
Howard.
Is literally what they did with DeAndre Jordan. Like Frank Vogel was literally giving the blueprint to Doc. He's like, here's what to do with a slow old center that can't defend a pick and roll. And Doc was like, I don't need it. Um, but yeah, like I don't understand there. Like Paul Reed would have been perfect last night, like the perfect guy to play in those moments because he's big enough to play the 5 and can rebound and will run all over the place and chase Wenyen Gabriel or switch on to DJ Augustine if he has to. Um, but you just refuse to do it. And I just don't understand the refusal, still, the stubbornness to just completely ignore that type of like adjustment to make. There's a clear adjustment to make, and you just didn't adjust.
Yeah, I'm very over fighting the battle at this point. It should have
Yeah, that's
happened
true.
forever ago. It's very clear that it's not going to happen this year,
Yeah.
maybe ever. James, I do want to ask, back against the wall, Sixers backup center, would you rather have DeAndre Jordan or Dwight Howard right now?
Which one of the two? Dwight Howard.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think Dwight has more left in the tank than DeAndre
He's
Jordan,
at
which is
least more of an athlete, I feel like, at this point.
and it's incredibly depressing when we're thinking like we were in the same boat that Dwight Howard is not good enough to be the backup center, and we're now
Yeah.
saying that we would take him over the guy that we have as our backup center. So
Yeah.
very, very concerning moving forward. But I agree. DeAndre just does not have the legs left. And when you look at like the two of them, like Dwight has drastically changed his game and come from the guy that was super post heavy, big, strong, to he's adjusted into a guy that's just purely a lob threat, purely a rebounder, and honestly has increased in his like verticality and stuff like that in his late years. When you look at DeAndre Jordan, his entire game at his peak was purely catching lobs, being like the minimal version of what Dwight Howard is right now. And he's lost that burst, he's lost that jump, and that was his entire like identity as a player, was being able to go up, get it, and slam it down. And if you can't do that, like, and there are moments where he does, like he
Yeah.
had a couple
Yeah.
last
Yeah.
night. statistically a pretty good game from DeAndre Jordan. Ended with 9 points, 7 rebounds, 4 of 6 shooting, 14 minutes. Like that looks pretty decent on paper, but I just don't buy in that like that's going to cut it in the playoffs. And I would go as far as say like I'm pretty confident that it's not going to.
Yeah, like, I was gonna say the same thing, like, I think if you looked at DeAndre Jordan's highlights from last night, you're like, "Okay." Like, you're
Yeah,
feeling pretty
exactly.
good about that. He gets a couple lobs, a couple offensive rebounds and putbacks, whatever it may be, but there's just nothing it's just not there, and, like, I just don't understand, like, I really would like I'd want somebody to ask, like, what's the reasoning behind this? Like, just because he's old? Like, because he's played in the playoffs because he played for you in Los Angeles? Like, I just don't really understand the reasoning behind it, and, I don't even know if Doc does either, but like you said, it is kind of it's a tiring, it's an exhausting argument to be in because, I mean, the argument's completely one-sided, the only person that's defending that at all is Doc. Um, I don't know if there's anyone else that's really, like, calling for DeAndre Jordan to be the backup center at
Yeah.
this point, but, like you said, it's exhausting and probably, frivolous to continue talking about at this point, so to move on a little bit, there's some maybe I don't wanna say concern, maybe a little bit of concern, with James Harden right now.
Yeah.
Just looks like there's a little bit off, the energy and the shot. I mean, the shot just looks is just not falling right now. So what are you thinking? I would like to see personally, I would like to see, whenever the next game is that Joel Embiid sits, there's 10 games left, assuming he might sit at least one more. I would hope that they get James Harden a night where Embiid's not playing and
He
just
can do his
hand
thing.
him the keys and say, go. Go
Yeah.
do whatever you gotta do. Take 10 threes. I don't care. Because the shot just looks a little bit off right now. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I would not mind that tactic at all. The thing I will say, I think I'm more on the like not worried about it than most people. I
Yeah.
mean, first off, like he's a hot and cold player in terms of like when he's on, he's really good. When he's cold, he's not. And we're kind of banking on like we need the hot to hit for the playoffs in a way. So
Yeah.
like in a weird twisted way, I'm just like we'll suffer through it now. Like it's okay. Again, give it 10 games, and that's when the real show starts. Excuse me. The other thing I will say is his gravity matters more than his shooting, I think. Like even him, he was 1 of 6 from 3 last night. He like hasn't shot it at a real consistent base since his first couple games here. But there's still teams still fly out to double him 30 teams out, 30 feet out. That still opens up passing lanes. That still creates space for Joel, and that's what's missing. And as a whole, his playmaking is more important to this offense than his scoring. We've seen like there's other guys that can do it. When you think about look at just how much Maxi's benefited is the prime example, and him being able to string it along, get the offense running right. Those are all great things that are still absolutely happening with Harden. And I think it's pretty clear he's still an upgrade, even though he isn't shooting his best. So I'm not that worried about it overall.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat too, and I was saying it last night. I mean, I was talking to my girlfriend who doesn't care, but I'm telling her anyway, like, "He's gonna be alright, like, don't worry." Like, she's like, "He's not shooting well." I'm like, "Don't worry about it, he's gonna be fine."
Yeah.
Uh, but, yeah, I do think he's gonna be fine, he's gonna figure it out. I want him to take like, there's been a couple times where, the ball has swung to him, and I want him to take those threes. Like, I think
Yeah.
that's where you
Catch and
kinda
shoot.
start catch and shoot a little bit. I mean, everything's off the dribble for him, but everything's been off the dribble for him for the last decade. So, like, you can't tell him you're not doing something right when the step back three is always there. And he did hit one last night,
I will
but
say
yeah,
I think he looks that's probably one of my largest concern if I'm picking one. He looks like uncomfortable catching and shooting, which that's just a normal basketball thing. Like you just have to be able
yeah,
to do that. And it's like there's at times where he'll catch it and it's like his thought process is like, do I have time to dribble real quick? Not just like, do I have time to shoot
yeah,
it? So it's like if he can get to the point, and I was super thrilled in the first couple games, the movement off ball and the catch shoot. Like there was one play where he cut to the corner right by the bench
yeah,
that play specifically was one of those like this is gonna work moments for me. There
yeah.
hasn't been as much of that lately, and I do think he for sure feels so much more comfortable doing his little dribble, dribble, dribble step back than he ever will on the catch and shoot, which in a way is fine, but you have to be able to do a little bit of both.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. There's gonna be, I mean, and it is a learning curve. Like again, what he's
Yeah,
played. How many games has he played here now? 10,
yeah, a little over, I think
little over
12.
10,
More,
12.
yeah,
Yeah, like so not many. Like in the grand scheme of things, not very many. And he's only been here like literally he's just been here for like a little over a month and a half.
yeah,
So
12 games, 12 games.
yeah, so and like again, he put up 24, 7, and 7 last night. So like we're talking about a bad game from James Harden is 24, 7 and 7. Um, he took over in the third. Uh, he had
Yeah,
what
for sure.
14 in that quarter. Like I, as much as there is like that's kind of what I'm banking on is the fact that like okay he hasn't been playing his best basketball. We haven't seen his best basketball in a while. Um, and I think that there's like teams have seen him, like seen this team and kind of made that first adjustment. I think they're kind of in the process of making their adjustment to kind of get back into a rhythm. And I'm not worried when I think about it. I'm just not that worried about it. The shots are going to start falling. He's James Harden. Like
Yeah.
it's not a role player. It's not a guy like, oh, he got hot and he's not Furkan Korkmaz. I'm not worried about that hot streak to kind of fluctuate so much. Obviously, if he's putting up 30, we're having a different conversation, but 24, 7 and 7. He was 7 of 18 from the field, 9 of 10 from the line. A turnover late, which was strange. I don't know like what happened there, but
Yeah.
again, it's stuff like that that they're still working out the kinks. So again, like you said, I'm not gonna panic about that, especially a 24, 7 and 7 game. Like if that's what he's putting up and we're saying, oh no, he had a bad game, like you got to put that in perspective.
Yeah, and also this is who James Harden is in a way in terms of like there are the ups and downs. And
Yeah.
when you're looking at a trade, like there was like the Tyrese Halliburton kind of hypothetical. It's like if you're trading for that, you're kind of trying to like mold him into what we need in the offense, how it all flows together. It's a different mindset when you're getting a guy like James Harden, who James Harden is exactly who he is at this stage of his career. You're getting the good, the bad, the ugly, everything that comes with it, and
Yeah.
we're hoping that it all fits together enough. So it's like he's not going to change, and he's made his little adaptations already, and he is trying to make it work as best as possible. He's still for the most part been on James Harden best behavior mode, which I still love to
Yeah.
see and I'm happy about. And I do think he genuinely cares and wants to win as much as there's like been takes that might necessarily be the case in the past. But I mean, like this, we got to rock with it. This is our guy, and I'm okay with like a guy that is poor shooting is still shooting, which is an upgrade for
Yeah.
this team. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you kind of had to get back down to that baseline of like, a month and a half ago, we just didn't have James Harden. Like we
Yeah.
didn't have somebody else and not have James Harden. We just like didn't have James Harden. So, I mean, I want to talk over, I guess, no, actually, we'll push that till later when we talk about the NBA awards. To move off the Sixers for a second, there was a fun thing that happened last night, something that I enjoyed.
Me too.
Um, and, the NBA is littered with people talking about heat culture and this and that and they got it all figured out. They're the hardest working team, blah blah blah. Like you said earlier in the show, Sean, they lost to the Sixers without Harden and Embiid. Last night they lose to the Warriors who didn't have Curry, Klay Thompson, or Draymond Green. So a little bit of trouble in paradise for Miami, and there seemed to be an argument in their huddle, uh, which was headed by Jimmy Butler. So what did you see from that little debacle that they had?
Yeah, interesting how it all kind of like broke down for me versus like what was popping up on Twitter and I saw it. So it was like the
Yeah,
first clip that I saw come out was like the Haslam and Butler being like pushed apart and it was just
yeah,
kind of like those are two guys that I'm not like shocked to see in an altercation given like whatever.
right,
And then a couple minutes later it was like the video of Spoelstra and Butler and I was like, all right, that's a more noteworthy deal to me. And I mean, I we'll see if like more details come out. I honestly don't think a lot will, just because I think the Heat will keep it as under wraps as possible. He's Jimmy Butler in the same way that we're saying like James Harden is James Harden. Jimmy Butler is Jimmy Butler, and he's a much more like dangerous version of himself in terms of like can be explosive. We've seen him here. We saw the Brett Brown fire ups and the everything that was going on behind the scenes here. That is who he is. You cannot like. I'm sure he's in the wrong in this situation. I guess is my take. Watching everything, I feel like, but there's no way that Jimmy Butler did not say something out of pocket or in a place he shouldn't have. Two guys that he clearly shouldn't have. Very crazy that Udonis Haslem is still being paid to be an NBA player. So I don't know what that's all about, but he is a guy who's about it. So he's not a guy that's going to be backing down to Jimmy
yeah.
Butler either.
Yeah, I think so. My take on it, the way that I like saw it, and kind of I got it in like the tidbits the same way that you did. Like you get the higher angle from Bleacher
Yeah.
Report at first, they're like, oh, what happened? And then there's the sideline angle where you see Spoelstra say to Butler, like, what, you want to fight me?
Hmm.
Like, so to me, it looked like Butler was saying something a little bit out of pocket, a little bit off colored. to Spo and has him kind of sit up for Eric Spoelstra, which I think is good and right by Udonis Haslem. I've never been a guy that's I know that UD is like really, well renowned around the league and people really respect him and there's a lot that he does, for the Heat culture, if you want to put it that way. But yeah, it was definitely interesting. And they downplayed it a lot. Spoelstra said after the game, like, "Oh, we were trying to see where we were gonna do for dinner after the game," and they kind of made jokes out of it. And they Spoelstra said he didn't make much out of it. But to me, that's like, to have player versus player confrontations and butting heads like that. I feel like that happens a lot. Like we kind of saw it. You see that all the time.
Mhm.
But player to coach, especially your best player,
Yeah.
like your all-star, your, leader now like
Vocal leader
having
for sure.
yeah, like a real issue with the coach where, his response is what you want to fight me. And then having to basically get into an altercation with essentially another coach, which is Udonis Haslem, who's kind of like, "I'll beat your ass. I'll beat your ass." And another thing that bothers me, and this has always been my gripe with Jimmy Butler, is that he does a lot of yapping and he does a lot of talking and yelling and, "Oh, I'm from wherever. I've been through this and that. I'm not one to mess with." But when Udonis Haslem stands up 2 inches from his face and said, "I'll beat your ass," and he walks to the other side of the huddle, gets up and walks away, like that's the problem I have. You talk about his thing with Jokic, and he was 5 feet from where that happened, and he didn't say anything to Nikola Jokic until they were 30 feet apart, saying, "I'll meet you out in the back." Like that's always a problem I've had with Jimmy Butler. So I don't know. All I'll
Yeah.
say is that I'm happy it wasn't the Sixers. I'm happy it was the Heat. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, for sure. I think this was like a weird situation where it's like a one of those like everyone's trying to keep their composure, but is very pissed off at the same time. So it's like it's definitely a big deal that Spoelstra was involved. He's a guy that really doesn't take any shit as a coach and is very
Yeah.
well respected as a coach. So for him to be all fired up, and he for sure was in the way that he kept circling back to Jimmy, he was not going away, and Jimmy right back to him. I
Yeah.
wish Spoelstra would have like pulled him off the court right there, taken him out, and making a show out of that. I the Jimmy Butler experience is one that's been seen on many teams at this point. Been here in Philly, been in Minnesota, been in Chicago. You just know like that's kind of who he is. That it like kind of what you're getting a little bit of the roll of dice with that. Would you would you consider a Jimmy Butler for Tobias Harris swap, James?
No.
Not
I
having it.
hate Jimmy Butler, man. I don't one definitely like Jimmy Butler doesn't I don't even know how to say this in the right way. He's shooting less than 10% over the last
Yeah,
2 months from 3. So,
crazy.
like, not any better at the role that we need. And, like, you already have 2 leaders. You don't need a third, especially a guy that's gonna muck up the locker room, as they say. But the one thing I'll say about Eric Spoelstra is, like, I was talking to my friend who's a Heat fan, and he was like, "I love Spo." I'm like, one of the best things about being a Heat fan is having him as the coach. And I was like, I really can't deny that. I can't say I've always had something like bad to say about the Heat. The one thing I guess I can't say anything bad about is that Eric Spoelstra is,
For
just
sure.
one of the best coaches, one of the best leaders. And I think if there's a guy to handle that in any type of way, I think it is Eric Spoelstra. And he's been through everything. He came
Mhm.
in the whole, the
Worked his
Heatles,
way up.
all of that. Yeah. And he's been with that organization since like the early 90s. So, he's that guy. And I think that for them, it's probably good that he's, at the helm. But no, I don't even think about Jimmy Butler, man. He's one of those guys that like, I know a lot of people, especially last year, were like, "Oh, we could have used him." I don't care. I don't care if he's the last guy on planet Earth. I'll go get somebody else off the street. I don't care. I don't want
Yeah,
him.
he's also a guy I think kind of got swept up in his own I guess evolution and like
Yeah.
he came into the league as the guy, obviously a crazy backstory with everything that he's been through and bouncing around, being homeless, going through JUCO, doing the whole spiel. And then when he got to the league, 30th overall pick by the Bulls, which I was a huge Bulls fan in the D Rose time. So I was a big Butler
Yeah.
fan of the guy, and he became the guy that was like the scrappy, just play defense, do that. And then when he became like more and more of the guy, like he got more and more of the guy in his own mind. And at this point in his career, I feel like he's back to a little bit of being just like the play defense, scrap, do the little things, roll, and it's like you can't keep the star mentality with the whatever role. And sure, like his stats are better than that. I'm not trying to diminish exactly
No.
what he does, but I don't think he's up there with like the stars of the league. And one of the main reasons why I think the Heat are fraud contenders this year is because if Jimmy Butler is your best player, I don't think you're capable of winning a championship. And that rings true no matter what team he's on.
Yep, I absolutely agree. Enough about the Heat because I don't
Yeah.
like them. So let's move on. I think we spent a little bit more time than I think we anticipated talking about them. Um, Nice to talk about them after beating them though. So
Yeah. Who
let's
caused
there's
this?
10. What's up?
Sixers caused this
Yeah,
meltdown, some would
I
say.
loved that. I loved that last night saying a Maxi broke the Heat. That's funny and very very good for us. Anything, maybe the one thing I love more than beating the Heat is beating the Celtics.
Hmm.
Um, those are my two favorite things I think that have in the entire world. But to talk about these 10 games that are left, they're going to complete this road trip. They're out west. They play the Clippers tomorrow. But there's some NBA awards that are kind of up in the air right now. We've talked about the MVP. Obviously, Embiid is the favorite right now in that category. I think barring any unforeseen circumstance over the next 2-3 weeks, I think the award is his. To be honest, it's his to lose for sure.
Yeah.
But then when you're talking about the rest of this team, Embiid is also in consideration. He's a top 3 favorite for Defensive Player of the Year. Matisse Thybulle is also in that consideration. I think he's like 7th in the odds. And then Tyrese Maxey is top 5, I believe, in most improved player. And I think we talked about this a little bit before, but I do have some opinions on that award. But right now, if you're thinking, is Embiid the only one that's going to get recognized nationally for his efforts this year? Or do you think Maxey can sneak in there as well?
Yeah, I think first off, I would like to see a couple more like dominant performance from Embiid to just like
Yeah.
cement this because there's still like the Jokic and Giannis whispers and a lot of guys pushing for Jokic as well. So I wouldn't I don't think it's as like won by Embiid as I think a lot of people talk like it is. So I would definitely like to see a couple of big performances, like maybe 2 more like massive games from Embiid, which just to like hammer it home. But I really do hope he wins the MVP. He's earned it. He's played his butt off all season. The only reason the Sixers are in the position they are in because of his efforts, especially early on in the season, especially in the pre-Harden team. Beyond that, I guess my short answer is I do think that Embiid will be the only one being honored. Maxi's such an interesting like topic about it because I mean, in general, second year players never win most improved because the second year is when kind of you're expected to make that leap as a player. It's like you had your adjustment and now's to go. And that's kind of what happened. But it's the leap that he's made has been so massive that I do think he deserves recognition and discussion about it in ways that I don't know are necessarily happening or will happen. And defensive player of the year, I I just like think that award needs to shift a little bit too in terms of like it's always just like the biggest shot blocker or biggest like Giannis or Embiid or Rudy Gobert or whoever. Like it's always that category of defenders versus like there needs to be a more prioritization on perimeter defenders because that's what wins or loses in the NBA now. So I would like that to shift as well, but I don't think unfortunately Embiid or Matisse will win that award.
Yeah, I think altogether, honestly, the discourse and just in general the awards, I think are just it's not as cut and dry anymore. I feel like as it
Yeah,
used to be. Like the criteria for the MVP, they change the goalposts all the time with what it is. At first, like if you're not a top 5 seed, you weren't going to get it. But then, Jokic is in consideration, and
yeah,
all these guys. Like I mean, and now it's like Devin Booker isn't even being talked about. He's a leading scorer on the best team in the league. I don't think Devin Booker is the MVP because he has a really good team around him. But like, how is that the consideration? Like John Morant, you talk about him. I also don't think that John Morant is the most valuable player in the league. His team is really good without him. But does that matter? Like, I don't know. Like, it just seems like there's a lot going on. Like, you can't have a bad team. Right, you can't have a bad team and be the MVP because if you were the MVP, you would have carried them. But if you have a really good team and a really solid team that plays really well around you, you also can't be the MVP because then your team is too good and you're not carrying them, you're not dominating. But you have to find this sweet spot, which I think fortunately Joel Embiid is in right now.
yeah,
Is that sweet spot if he did carry this team and they're also still a really high seed, and they're one of the favorites to win, win the Eastern Conference. So I don't know. It kind of sucks just the talking about it. I think this draws narratives, and we talked about how this is just a narrative-based award anyway. It doesn't, really encapsulate what the most valuable player is. Same thing with the defensive player of the year. It just ends up being like, you know, it ends up being Rudy Gobert. It's like the default answer. Just,
Yeah.
I don't think that he's the most important. Maybe he is the most important defensive player in the league. I don't at times, but like Draymond Green said it before, like there's no defensive situation where you don't want me on the floor. He said that about him. You talked about that with Ben Simmons last year. You talk about guys like, I don't know. There's a lot of different guys out there that could be considered, the
Mhm.
perimeter defense. I think Embiid is up there. You talk about him like 3 blocks last night. He does it all the time. He does it in crunch time. I think he's more
Oh
of a
yeah.
clutch defensive player than like anything else. It's really interesting how he's able to just turn it on, deny shots, and it happens. Like I honestly feel like I see a clutch defensive play from Joel Embiid more often than I see a clutch offensive play, which is maybe the defensive play just stick out more because there's less of them. But um, I mean, Matisse Thybulle's up there too. We talked about him, a lot. He's up to 25. He's going to be probably at least all NBA, the second team again.
Yeah, he's an interesting one to me. I'm
Yeah.
so like just how unique he is as like a player as a whole and a defender as a whole. It's like he's not at all how you coach defense. He allows guys to get in front of him constantly. He chases from behind. He's reaching out. But like you look at the numbers and he's like off the charts in so many categories. He's already as of now, and obviously this is not like a total. This is a per year basis kind of thing. But he's
Mhm.
leading like the Sixers franchise in defensive plus minus in their box score, which is like crazy for a
Yeah.
guy that like isn't even like not a main contributor because I don't want to
Yeah.
diminish him, but a guy that's not like your lockdown. I don't know, you know what I mean? In that he's like
Yeah.
a limited role in what he does, but he's still that impactful. And I don't know. I'm torn on like how high Matisse's defensive ceiling is. I think he's improved as like a pure defender, not just like a chaos maker and a guy that just can like force the bad shot. He still needs to learn not that he doesn't need to block or steal on every single possession. He still needs to get a little better at just defending a guy and making things tough. And I hope he will. That will change things for him if he adds that to his repertoire as well. And he can pick his spots a little more and pair that with like creating chaos versus just being a smart defender, doing the right play. And to circle back to the MVP conversation, I absolutely think there needs to be like more clarity in like what this
Yeah.
actual award is because most valuable and best player are two very different conversations. And I mean, Joel is certainly in the conversation for both this year if you want to make it like that.
Yeah.
Uh, and like you said about Ja, I mean, the Grizzlies are 15-2 without him. So I'm not doubting Ja's greatness, but does that mean he's the most valuable? And I don't think Ja's a guy that's more of a media hypothetical than a actual like odds to win it hypothetical. But like the Sixers are 40-19 with Embiid, 5-8 without him. The if Joel Embiid was not on this roster this entire year, this is a lottery team. This is a team waiting on the draft odds and sitting back and would compete with some process teams. I feel like so the way that Embiid really did carry this team for the first half of the season specifically, I think should count for a whole lot. That's why the odds look the way they look, and I really am rooting for him to get it.
Yeah. And I genuinely do think he will. If he finishes out the season strong, I think he will. To go back to Thibault really quick,
Hmm.
there's a fine line I feel like with him that one, like you want him to kind of chill a little bit, maybe put on some pounds, just because if he's a bigger, stronger, frame, maybe he can kind of settle in, force guys to where he wants them, and make a smarter attack at the ball. But you also want him to continue flying around and wreaking havoc because that's what makes him so good. And there's just times where the second a player looks away, he's running behind and stealing the ball, or he made a play last night. They were just swinging it, and there was just a very slight lazy pass, and Matisse picks it off, flies on the court for a dunk. And as he improves offensively, I think he's just going to continue to be very important for this team. He's not going to win Defensive Player of the Year, but he will be on an all defensive team, which he deserves, I believe.
Yeah.
But to go to Maxi, and this is I think I've mentioned this before, and this is the last time I'll probably talk about it. But like you look at I think he's 5, and so like it's Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr. is up there, LaMelo Ball is up there, and DeJounte Murray, who I'm a big
Mhm.
DeJounte Murray fan, which we talked about during the trade deadline. like those guys, specifically the first three that I mentioned, are all guys that were drafted with the idea and the expectation of stardom. All
Mhm.
guys that were drafted to be faces of franchises. I don't get how the award can go to that player. That is not how this award has ever worked. The most improved player has been a guy that went from being relatively small role to improving and becoming a really big, much bigger role in this team. That is exactly what Maxey did. He went from 8 points per game to 17 and a half. He went from a 30% 3 point shooter to 41 and a half on double the attempts. He's doubled his attempts inside the 3 point line and stayed essentially the same. He shoots damn near 50% on floaters. He's 60% at the rim. He went from being an every other game kind of guy to the third most important offensive player on a team that has Joel Embiid, who's arguably the most important offensive player in the entire league, and James Harden. So like I don't understand how like the keys were handed to Ja and Jaren Jackson. The
Yeah.
keys were handed to LaMelo Ball. The Spurs have essentially handed the keys to DeJounte Murray. Tyrese Maxey walked up to Doc and took them and turned himself into something much, much more than what he was coming into. Like as a 21st overall pick, Desmond Bane is up there as well, who, by the way, deserves to be in that conversation because he was
Same way.
drafted
Yeah.
30th overall and went from not a huge role. But like also, how can you have three guys on the same team be the most improved player? Like I understand that they're playing really well, but that's not how it works. It's the same thing when Lou Will and Montrezl Harrell were 6 Man of the Year finalists. They played
Yeah.
on the same team. You both can't be the sixth man. There's only one guy on a team that can be the sixth man. So I just don't understand. Like that criteria bothers me because it's like you can't give the most improved player to a guy that was drafted number 2 overall and was a rookie of the year candidate. That's not how it works. I
Yeah.
just don't understand.
Yeah, no, I have no real arguments there, and I think Josh specifically is the prime example here. Is like you were the number 2 pick, you were very good last year. Like you going from a very good player to superstar is for sure like a leap, but like that's one you were absolutely expected to make.
Yeah,
Like that's like you're just in the proper career trajectory is like what the plan was for
yeah,
you or what everybody thought. So like and I don't want to diminish it because he's obviously a very good player, very great talent. But
exactly.
I do agree with your point. Looking at a couple of other names up there, Darius Garland, Miles Bridges. Bridges, I think, deserves some consideration. Anthony Simons as well. Uh,
Yeah,
but Simons is another guy who it's opportunistic. He's just is able to throw up 30 shots a game because of Dame being shut down, because of McCollum getting traded. And the counter argument to Maxey, which I don't necessarily agree with, but I'm sure this is being like talked about, is he's also very opportunistic, and then he's had way more minutes thrown to him than originally would be the case. But like Maxey's 100% capitalized on that, so that should be a
yeah.
credit to him more than anything.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I don't think he'll win it, unfortunately, because that would win me a lot of money because I put a lot of money on that at the start of the year. Um, but you know, Embiid for us is huge as well. We've talked
Yeah,
about that. So hopefully, you know, over the next couple of weeks, we'll be. I mean, actually, we won't even find out till after the season, so we still have a long way to go.
yeah,
But I think if he solidifies his campaign over the next 10 games, I think we'll have a good idea. And I think the narrative is falling in his direction, which is more important, I think, than anything else.
100%.
With what we talk about. So, you know, I don't have much else. If you have anything else,
Yeah, no, I'm good.
we'll let you
Couple
get
more.
back to your.
Yeah, a couple more tough games, two more late night starts, and then we're done for the season with that. So got that to look forward to.
Those are tough, man. I was falling asleep during halftime, and you know, no action. I'm about to fall asleep, but yeah, let you get back to your 10-page paper that you got to write.
Oh
It's
yeah,
the grind. It's that time of the year. So stick with us. You know, stay tuned over this West Coast trip. You can follow Sean at Sean_Bernard1. Follow me at JSPrain17. Follow the pod at Pig Swap Pod. Check out the YouTube. Get us anywhere you get your podcast, whether that's iTunes, Spotify, or wherever else. Make sure you check out BetUS and use our code PIGSWAP at login, and we'll talk to you guys next week.